the Brew News.
Hello and welcome to the Brew News. We are here with William Dalrymple.
Hello.
The greatest. I don't know how to describe.
I've just given
I don't know how to describe
lecture of an
you.
hour and I'm now losing my words. But very nice to meet you, sir. Very nice to be on Brew
Welcome
News.
to the show.
Thank
the
you.
Brew News. Yes. Okay. Now tell us something. The 4-volume thing that you started. What
The
made
Company
you pen-
Quartet is the thing you're talking about.
Yes, that's right.
The Anarchy, White Mughals, Return of a King, and Last Mughal. 4 books on the East India Company. 20
The
years
4.
work, all in a big cover now. So
No,
in
what
a box.
what inspired you to start writing it?
I started with just one book with White Mughals, and I live in Delhi, and I spent my life writing about British-Indian relations, and I see echoes in the story of the British and India of my own life and my own relationship with India, and it's just carried on going. And the story of the East India Company is the story of the world's first multinational. It's the story of how one British company, based out of one tiny London office, astonishingly ended up conquering the richest country in the world, which in the 18th century was India. And it did it, bizarrely, with Indian capital, loaned by Jain and Hindu merchants, and using Indian mercenaries, the sepoys. By 1799, there were 200,000 Indian mercenaries working for a company where there were only 20,000 white guys running it. So it's a bizarre bit of history, but it's absolutely fascinating. And it's so different from what we're taught in traditional histories. And so it interested me very much. It's also, of course, a story of corporates and how venal, how violent, and how what a threat corporations can be, as well as creating wealth. They can be very negative forces.
But another question is, the kind of research that you do, it's quite comprehensive. It goes, yeah. So how do you manage to do it? And do you have a team of researchers? How do you do that?
I don't use researchers, but I did work very closely with translators of Persian and Urdu, and particularly a guy called Bruce Donnell, who just died, who worked on all 4 books with all the amazing Persian manuscripts in the Indian National Archives and Tonk and the British Library and the various other libraries across India. And those sources are so rich, but very few people today can read Mughal Persian. And it's a dying art. There's only a handful of people really that can read scribal Mughal Persian. And I'm going to miss Bruce a lot. Now he's not there to help me with this.
Sorry to hear about that. Now, the thing is, see, it's a common perception that the history, it belongs to the rulers. So what is your point of, how do I say, how do you get that history? How do you know that this is authentic or this is the exact thing that happened?
Well, it is largely true that history is dominated by the winners, but the losers' accounts are often out there, and certainly in the story of the East India Company's conquest of India, there are many, many sources by Marathas, by the sultans of Mysore, the rulers of Hyderabad, the rulers of Bengal, and they're all out there, but you need to learn Urdu and Persian to get at them. And so otherwise, if you just use English, you just end up with the British point of view, which is interesting, but it's only one point of view, and it's in those other sources that, in a sense, the real depth of perspective lies.
Now, you are one of the best-selling historians out there, right? You've written 5 books out now? 10. Oh, wow. Sorry. 10 books. But this is the quartet, the 4-volume, right? Now, what do you think about the advent of technology? Now, kids everywhere, they're using WhatsApp. They're using, their perception point is only their mobile, right? So, what do you think? Is that diluting history?
I don't think you're right. I think that people obviously do communicate through WhatsApp and instant messaging and so on, but I think people still have the capacity to read big, heavy books. I mean, whole generations grew up reading Harry Potter, which is 400 or 500 pages at a shot. And if you challenge people will respond. I mean, my books are not light; they are often 400 or 500 pages too. But I think if you write interestingly and fill it with character and research, people will respond. I don't think there's any sense in which history is dying, it's becoming a subject of greater interest, particularly in India, where there's these big culture wars now, and people. I mean, there's an Indian nationalist perspective, and there's a Nehruvian perspective, and there's a war going on between the two different versions, and that in a sense can be a positive thing if it's conducted with facts. Based on primary research, not just on basis of bigotry and opinion and WhatsApp forwards.
That is the bane of this time, actually, right? So, tell us one more question is about the the historical things that you've written about. Yeah. Now, going back to the era, when India was called Sone ki Chidiya, right? Now that was during the Mughal time. We heard you say that that was because obviously the Bengal, there was a company, there was a huge income flux coming, right?
GDP came from India.
And what you hear now is the Mughals have not done, or they have looted and stuff. So is this part of propaganda? What exactly is happening over here?
So, I mean, it's a very complicated issue, and the difference between the Mughals and the British is that the Mughals, like any other pre-colonial power, fought battles and certainly conquered places. Every Indian dynasty in history always has, whether it's the Cholas, the Pallavas, the Kakatiyas, the Rashtrakutas. All these people were not pacifists. They went around looting and killing too. But the difference between all of them and the British was the British took the loot and took it to England. And didn't spend it in India. So while the Mughals built tombs and the Taj Mahal and forts and so on, as did in previous generations, the Cholas built amazing temples, the Pallavas built amazing, and so on. Those were in India. While what the British did was they took the money and spent it in London. So when you find all these lovely houses dotted around the British countryside built by East India Company people, this is money, assets stripped and looted from Bengal, and that led to a drain of wealth from India. So there is a big difference between what many dynasties did in Indian history and what's happening under the British.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for being with us, Mr. William Dalrymple. Looking
Like and subscribe to our channel. Hit the bell icon to get notification from the Brew News.